Hello everyone, and thank you once again for joining today's webinar. My name is Edward from goFLUENT's marketing department, and it is my distinct privilege to introduce you to our speaker today, Dr. Maurizio Morselli, who will be discussing the concept of return on learning. In this webinar, Maurizio will cover some points including the impact of training on your company's competitive edge, the formula to calculate the value training adds to your human capital, and the effect of return on learning on corporate investment planning. Lastly, before we begin, please allow me to give you a brief introduction about our speaker. As a talent development executive, training manager, and university professor, Maurizio Morselli has traveled the world in search of simple solutions to complex human performance challenges. He is backed by years of experience managing training and organizational development functions, and is currently working with Banca IFIS, an Italian specialty finance player specializing in financial SMEs with a complete range of financial tools. Now, without further ado, please allow me to present to you Maurizio to start the webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Edward. I really appreciate after that introduction. I hope I can live up to that description. Anyway, thank you. And it's a sunny day here in Milan today, and I hope it's sunny wherever you are. And if it's not atmospherically sunny, I hope it's sunny in other ways. Okay, before we get into the agenda, let me talk a little bit immediately about our objective today so that we can get on with our work. Today, what I will be doing is really sharing one approach from measuring the increase of human asset value. You know, what value does a learning event provide? So that's what I'll be talking about for, I think, for the next 30 to 40 minutes. About 36 to 37 years ago, a young professor in New York conducted evaluations for his classes, and his classes averaged about 4.5 to 4.7 on a scale of 5. The school and the professors were really happy because he delivered very effective lessons. The question that always hovered around the mind of this young professor was, is anybody really learning anything? I know that we delivered some training. I know we did some classes. They did classes. But is anybody really learning anything? And are we measuring what people learned? Well, I was that professor, and that question still is in my mind. After people have a learning experience, are they really learning anything, and what are we measuring? Today we'll scratch the surface of how to measure and what are we going to measure. I believe that the true value of measuring is sometimes hidden in other metrics. So today, again, we'll scratch the surface, and I hope that today is only the beginning of maybe a conversation that will continue around this topic. So our friend Albert Einstein knew it well when he said that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted, of course, counts. You know, to evaluate something means to find its worth, to find its value. But value, to me, and based on my experience, value is a relative term. Yes, you know, we measure, but what and how are we measuring what we want to measure? So when on my current job, but other jobs too, there are a number of things that I've been learning and continue to learn. So today I'll take you on this brief trip. We'll talk about work and learning and how the two intersect, and how there is actually there are lines that are blurred about work and learning. We'll talk about evaluations. We'll talk about linear and non-linear learning, which is what's taking place today. In the old days of my experience, because I am old, but anyway, relatively old, of course. We'll talk about linear and non-linear learning. Today, there's a lot of non-linear learning going on. Humans as capital, that is the, perhaps is the fulcrum of what I'll be talking about. Humans as capital, humans as an asset to the organization. We see, if you visit many organizational websites, you will see that they claim that our human resources are our most valued asset, but we seldom measure the value that they acquire and the increase in their value. So I'll give you a quick overview of my very, very simple formula, and then you can create your own formula naturally. And then question and perhaps answers, but I think you can write some questions on your screen, on your chat, and I will get back to you with the answers. So on the right side of your screen, you will see a chat box. If you go down, and you can enter your message about anything that comes up, I'll gladly provide an answer. So so let's go on. When we interview candidates, smart, energetic young people with talent, okay. No. It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, okay, I have everything messed up here. No problem. So when we interview candidates, even smart, energetic, talented people, the young candidates asked us, what courses do you offer? Well, we don't offer really courses. What we provide are learning experiences. Yes, there are also some technical courses, but the point I want to make today is that event-based instructional interventions, or the course as a learning vehicle, is an outdated and useless way to look at workplace learning. Courses per se are just events. Courses are not always learning. Learning comes from many, many different sources. You see, courses are an artifact of a time when information was scarce and connections were few. Training courses delivery does not equate to learning. So, consider the following chart. It simply shows that initially most employees are a cost to the organization. We've made an investment, and this is the investment zone, and that over time, with the right talent practices, the right human resources practices, they become more and more valuable. So we start going above the line, and that is the return zone, where the organization is actually getting value out of the employee, an employee who is stimulated, who is motivated. So how we measure that is a different story, and that's the challenge that lay ahead. So, because learning serves many masters, as I say, learning serves many masters, it serves many purposes. Learning is not a static event. It moves, it has many objectives, and again, it serves many purposes. I am listing here 15 such objectives where the lines of work and learning and experiences and networking and socializing, those lines blur, and people learn through many different venues. I've listed only 15 here, potential purposes, what learning experiences can accomplish. As you can see from these 15 kind of purposes or objectives, we need to identify, first of all, the objective of a particular learning experience or training, if you will. We can use those terms interchangeably, but to me, learning is really what counts. So we have to define what are we measuring. Because, let me repeat it once again, work, experience, and learning converge to add value, but it's not just the learning, there are experiences, there is interactions that go on in offices. And how do you measure that? That's a challenge, which perhaps might not be solved today, but it's something that we need to work on. Learning is a universe. Training, again, is not learning. I see that learning doesn't occur on a single lonely planet, an isolated planet. It's a galaxy of many planets, satellites, stars. There's dynamic movement that goes on. And measuring the value of all of these experiences becomes, again, the challenge. The challenge is measuring the beauty of these learning interactions, measuring the value of learning that occurs not necessarily on a single planet or on a single plane or on a single course, and how that learning voyage increases the value. A different way of learning, of looking at learning, is this model that many of you might be familiar with. It's the classic 70-20-10. So learning, again, comes from many sources. The 70-20-10 is a commonly used formula within the training profession to describe the optimal sources of learning by successful professionals. It holds, well, this formula basically says that 70% of knowledge comes from job-related experiences, 20% from interactions with others, sharing. Just imagine all of the interactions that goes on via various chats, via WhatsApp, via Twitter, via all Facebook, and so on, all the social. So perhaps, and 20% and 10% from other educational events, formal educational events. I think this formula too needs to change. I think we're seeing a holistic way to learn, and I think that 10%, I mean that 20% exposure social learning is a much bigger piece of this learning pie. I believe it's evolving, and I believe it is changing. So, moving on. Old school. We see an old school guy over here, some rapper, old school music, and I think our classic evaluations, the 5-point evaluation scale, is simply old school. It is linear. It is based on an event. It's an evaluation that's based on an event in a physical classroom. Learning doesn't happen in the classroom, as we all know. It happens everywhere. It is networked learning, networked by people sharing. And I cannot emphasize this too much. Learning does not occur in a classroom only. Yes, classrooms are useful, but I think we need to rethink how learning achieves its objectives. It doesn't have to be in a classroom. When we used to think of training, we thought of courses, course 1, course 2, course 3, and course 4. But courses, again, are an artifact of a time when information was not available, was scarce, and connections were few. To determine the real value of networked learning, this new way of learning, we need a more open and wider view of learning. Again, traditional training analysis, such as Kirkpatrick's 4-level scale, I think it's an outdated model. I think it served its purpose. It may have some usage currently, but I think that these were designed to assess solutions that are delivered in a linear manner. Again, this type of scale is designed to assess solutions that are delivered in a linear manner. And learning is no longer linear. Networked, collaborative, learning platform solutions are the way people are learning in an informal manner. They're integrated with their workflow. People learn from home. So these traditional assessments, I believe, need to be used carefully because they might serve a limited purpose. So we need a slightly different perspective. That perspective, I think, is as simple as ABC, and it's my perspective. It doesn't have to be your perspective, but my perspective is as simple as ABC. ABC. What does that mean? It means anything but courses. Anything but courses in the classroom. I believe there's a lot of learning that goes on outside of the classroom. Learning is not static. It's quick, it's nimble, it's immediate, and it should be accessible anywhere, and it is. It's a universe of resources that we have today at our fingertips. The internet, in fact, nowadays is a fantastic environment that optimizes ABC. Anything but courses. Think about MOOCs, massive open online courses. Yes, they're called courses, but you can access them, stop them, revisit them, TED Talks, YouTube videos, various channels. You can review quick informational pills at any time. So we do not always need a box, also known as a classroom, to learn. And I hope everyone, I'm sure everyone agrees with that, but if not, I am open to the discussion. Again, what's going on today is nonlinear learning. You know, training is not what counts, learning is what counts. So, and more so than just learning, useful learning. Learning, again, is not an event. Learning is a collaborative, connected, it's a continuous process. It can and does occur in formal and informal ways, and in social ways every day, in and out of our job. Now, the key to determining the business value of network learning, however, I think is a more open way of looking at how we measure the outcomes of learning. What are we delivering and what is going on? Learning is going to become, I believe, increasingly personalized. We will have more choice over what we learn, how we learn it, when and where we learn it, and over the pace of our learning. So this is just the start of a huge wave of what I call democratized learning, where everyone can learn at any time, and there's an increasingly also huge surge of interest in free content. People who are, you know, looking for free content, and people use content every day. There's content available on the internet everywhere. People also provide valuable feedback in many ways, not only in formal feedback evaluations. People provide feedback verbally, feedback, however, that cannot be easily measured. I, for example, just to give you some examples, I received notes on WhatsApp from some of colleagues who are studying a particular topic, or colleagues who are with whom I am sharing particular information. I receive informal emails, Instagram comments. How do I measure that? Again, how do I factor this in an evaluation? Nonlinear learning requires a nonlinear evaluation, but we're not there yet. But it is something very, very important. Here I am going to show you an actual text from an email I received from a student that enjoyed the learning on a lunch and learn I did, a 1-hour lunch and learn on managing conflict. There was a discussion. This was not a course, it was a discussion. But I think this discussion actually created a lot more indirect learning than perhaps a course, a whole day course would have. This person went on and did some of his own research and found other information that they could have used that maybe I would have not been able to show in a class, or maybe that a class where a class would have not been practical. So this person is sharing the fact that this lunch and learn helped them, and they did a lot of work on their own. So I really didn't teach them anything, and maybe I stimulated some other informal learning. So how do I measure this? How do I put this on my monthly report? I can't. All I can do is share it with my boss, and in an effort not to appear too self-serving, this is an actual comment. So, but this is the actually the tip of an iceberg that it's exciting, because we're experiencing a shift or a progression from, we're going, of course, from the classical way of learning, the pedagogical mode of learning, where the teacher is the expert, moving on to the andragogical, where the teacher is the guide, facilitator, harnessing everyone's experience, to what I call paragogical, where the student is really a teacher who shares information with the facilitator, but also shares information with his colleagues, with his peers. So students as teachers. But if students become teachers, then we really don't need any trainers, do we? All we need is some learning platforms, and we need the internet. And they become attractive also to other corporations if students are teachers. So another thing that people ask me, what about, if we train them, like in this cartoon that we see, what if we train them and then they leave? But then what if we don't? And then they stay. So learning, the true measure of the value of learning is not really, yeah, it is its presence, but it's also its absence. What would happen if we didn't do it, if we did not stimulate this type of network learning? It's not a dilemma. People say it's a dilemma. We train people too much. We train them, and then our company trains. I've heard this said. Our company trains and our competition gains. Well, that's not training's fault or our educational strategy's fault. It's other organizational practices that are not capable of retaining employees. So the job of our organization is to train and retain, and for us to contribute to retaining the employees. So our human assets are capital. There are human capital. So what makes up our organization's value? Two important assets, as we all know. One is definitely the human capital, and it's at the bottom because it's at the bottom of this image, because it is the foundation of an organization's value. Of course, we have economic value, economic capital. So here we have the two key components that make up an organization's value. Now, there's also a belief, I like to throw this out, that companies really don't own people, so we can't account them on the balance sheet. Yeah, that's technically true, but companies do reap the benefits of employees' work, and we can account them on if not on the balance sheet, on a sheet that shows value, like what I'm trying to propose here. Because without informed, stimulated employees, an organization is doomed to perish. Again, without well-informed, knowledgeable, free-to-learn, stimulated employees, an organization is doomed to perish. You remember when everyone had a Nokia phone? Everyone had Nokia. Well, where is Nokia today? I don't have a Nokia phone. I believe that Nokia stopped learning. Nokia people, Nokia's human assets stopped being curious. Many of them left, and that is why organizations perish, because its human capital is not valued, because its human capital is not stimulated, and learning is no longer occurring. That's my belief. So in fact, it's quick, I don't have to show you this. There are loads of statistics that show the value of human capital. But this is just a study conducted by IBM demonstrates this quite clearly. Human capital as a key source of sustained economic value. This was research by IBM, CEO of study. Anyway, now let's get to what we've been waiting for, assigning value. So assigning capital, the value of economic value is easy. You look at the numbers, that's really easy. Our sales growing, we're making profit, and ROI, stock price going up, yes, our value is going up. But assessing the value of human capital is not so easy. A value to human capital is, if we agree that human capital is valuable, then we need to assess, measure, and communicate that human capital improvement, that human capital has in fact improved. And we need to communicate that clearly to our organization. Because our organizations measure the value of all of their assets, the real estate assets, equipment, technology, on their balance sheet. We know that. And so we must measure, again, our human value. So when we set out to measure value of our organizations, the value of learning experience, we must look at how it increases asset value of our humans. Again, the key here is we measure economic value, we must measure human value, human asset value. But we must do it smartly, practically, and swiftly, or I should say practically, probably is a better way, in a pragmatic way. We must focus on what's really, really important. We need to measure what's really important. Naturally, we can ask about the quality of materials, the user-friendliness of the material, the organization of the course, and all of those nice things. But the bulk of the focus, to me, is the response to one single, most powerful question, a question which, when positioned well, and is based on the element of trust in our employees. Trust that they will answer candidly and objectively to this one question. You know, our employees are intelligent people. They're intelligent assets. They're capable of answering this question objectively. People will say, but will they be able to answer this question? I will show you the question now. But I think, in my experience, the answer to the question I'm about to show you, first of all, the question is simple, but the answer has yielded many important pieces of information and intelligence about real value, and it has opened up very useful conversations to the organization. And it's one simple question. If I had it my way, I would ask only this question at the end of any educational experience, or during an educational experience, and even post-educational experience. A very simple question. You have a scale of 0 to 100. Based on this scale, how much has your knowledge and understanding of this topic, of this issue, has increased? And this topic that has applied to your job, that has practical applications to your job, and I think this is an important question to ask. Yes, we can ask the other questions. We need to do what our organizations require. This question, to me, yields a lot of information. And then we can have a very simple, open-ended explanation as to what they mean. But this question, to me, is crucial. It's a simple calculation. We're going to look at the calculation now. Again, this is my formula. It doesn't have to be your formula. It's a formula that I have used, and I've had discussions with my colleagues about it, and I've been able to talk about the value that training provides. So I'll show you the example without a build or anything. It's very simple. Is the percentage of practical learning increase timing the human capital investment? What is the human capital investment? What is the human capital costing us? You deduct the training costs, and you have a figure. And I hope that makes sense. It's uncannily simple, but one that opens up, I think, a world of awareness about how we're providing value. So practical learning, how much did the learning increase? Practical and applicable to the job, times how much we're spending on that human capital, minus the training costs, and you have the return on learning. Let me show you an example. This is an example with fictitious figures, but an example that I've used. Okay, here we go. So let's take company XYZ that has 200 employees completing a learning task. Could be a self-guided learning course, a seminar, an online learning series of educational pills, a seminar, an assignment, whatever that is. So we start with their average salary per employee. Let's say they're making 25,000 whatever, 25,000 beans per annum, $25,000, euros, drachma, whatever they're making, 25, not drachma, no, but per annum. But anyway, 25,000 of something per annum. The company invests 25K with the benefits and salary, perhaps more, but by times 200 is 5 million. The employee says, there's people who say 1%. There's people who said, I didn't learn really much, but I found it useful in other ways. That's fine. But I average out 15% learning increase. 15% learning increase to me means, if this is an asset, 15% increase in human asset value. This is 15% increase in that asset. 15% return on learning against 5 million. To me, that's 750,000 gross return on learning. I take out the cost of training, and I have simply 600,000. Maybe training costs more, 250. I still have 500,000 increase in human capital value. I have increased the value of the asset in which I have invested. That is simply it's a very simple formula that could be elaborated. But, again, the ways in which employees are, training is assessed can vary. I use this formula. It works for me. I definitely include other qualitative metrics, but this to me is the bottom line. So there's a lot of time and effort and money being put into training by numerous organizations. And I think there needs to be an effective way of knowing whether it was worth it, whether training, whatever we call it, training, learning. But unfortunately, some organizations seem to be more concerned with the actual teaching and the actual, what I call administrivia, the trivial pursuit of administrative measurements, rather than discovering whether or not employees learned anything applicable to their job and how has it increased their value. Seeing a return on investment is important, and equally important is knowing that employees have progressed, they have developed, and are comfortable in sharing information informally as part of a living learning community where employees are stimulated. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done by other parts of the organizations as well. To me, this is the overriding priority: seeing the return on investment and knowing that employees have progressed and developed via the learning experience. This again is the priority. So I think we're moving very quickly. How much do we have? Oh, okay. So we're moving quickly. I promised you 30 to 40 minutes. I think we're moving towards the end. I showed you again, this was a very quick overview. I want to wrap up again by saying that there is no single formula. There's really no single formula for experimenting. This is an experiment for some people, but also thinking about how we evaluate workplace learning. The ways in which an employee can be assessed or evaluated are many. And traditionally, measurement was based on a multiple choice questions or even an exam at the end of training, but this only focused on short-term retention of knowledge, memory. So there was no real way of knowing whether an employee could effectively apply the recently acquired knowledge, skills, or abilities, or expertise in any working environment. Instead, measurement should be focused around the individual's increased level of capacity to carry out a particular task or duty, and not whether they can pass the test. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say a couple of things. Think ABC, anything but courses. We've got to identify how learning takes place. We have to identify what really counts for our organizations. What counts for my organization is based on our values, on our beliefs, on our mission, and our culture. So evaluate what counts through simple assessments. Again, use simple assessment. Evaluate what counts. Measure what counts for your organization. Be practical. Be creative. Let me go back. And most importantly, be willing to change method. You know, if businesses know that the members of our staff, if we know that the members of our staff are comfortable and confident in our role, in their roles, if they communicate openly, if they share generously, then the investment of time, energy, and resources on training, I think will all be worth it. And we can make a difference, again, by thinking smartly, simply. We can make a difference by measuring and communicating what really counts, the real return on learning. And with that, I thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to your comments, and I'm looking forward to opening up this conversation. This, again, was a discussion stimulant, and I hope we can continue this conversation and get maybe a little bit more granular about how we move forward in practical ways. So thank you, and I hope we can stay connected, and until next time, have a great day and a great season. Thank you.
There are some questions.
Yeah, some people saying that I want to say something about Nokia first of all, since I mentioned Nokia. Some people say Nokia started a new mobile phone, 3310. I think that's great, and that was not put down on Nokia. I used it as an example, historical example, documented that nobody, I don't see, even at our desk right here, I don't see anyone with a Nokia phone, but I understand. Yeah, I agree that the 15% is the crucial number. It needs to be measured in an objective way. It is somewhat subjective, and what I usually do is follow up individually. I'd like to talk about that. We didn't have time today, but we also do a follow-up 6 months after. If I can, one of the things I do is try to stay in touch with all the people that are learning, and now I showed you an example. I didn't show you the document. Actually, there's no documents. I asked people to tell me what does 15% mean. And some people say, well, I think I'll be able to save 1.5 hours a week, so that's 15%. Again, that's subjective, but that's a kind of a collective measurement. And I will probably, by the way, at the end of the seminar, I will collect all of the seminar. This is not a seminar. This is not a class. It's a webinar, and it's a discussion. We will. I will send you more specific answers within the next week. You will receive some answers to the questions I'm receiving. I'm very pleased about the response. Again, this was a stimulus. So. The other elements to be considered when determining the return on learning, I really consider the other elements I consider is the ability of a person to do their job more efficiently and effectively. And I'll send you some example again. Then there's another one. Non sono sicuro di capire la formula. They don't understand the formula. Yes, the efficacy of the person. So I'll translate in Italian, in English rather. The increment of 50% is the effectiveness of the person, not of a single competence, right? Yes, it's the effectiveness of the person based on that particular experience. So on a single competence, but actually, I understand the question. I measure the efficacy of the person, not of the single competence. The person, because of that competence, is a more effective asset to the organization. But I will send you some other specific follow-up questions that are asked. Okay. This is not a question. How about making policy of certain training employee cannot resign, otherwise he will reimburse the cost of training to the company and can leave? Some companies do this. I have found that some companies that do this are insecure about their ability to retain employees. Speaking from a pure practical point, it becomes very difficult to recover the money, to have an employee reimburse the money that we've invested in training if they leave the company before a specific amount of time. Do we take it away from their salary? So we prefer to trust the employee that they will stay. I don't believe in making that a policy. Some people ask, is there an optimal time frame? Well, what I didn't cover today is we asked one immediately after their experience, but we also follow up 6 months, and we also asked the person's manager about this. Some people find it simple. I find it important that colleagues and the leader of the employee is measuring the increase of learning value. Yes, of course, the leader also needs to be on board with this. You need to make sure you're specific about what you're measuring and communicate to the leader, to leaders in the organization, what in fact you're measuring and how you're measuring. You need to be on the same page, actually. So. Somebody says, intriguing, inspiring, just my cup of tea. Could you recommend any further reading or magazines where this kind of discussion is engaged in? Okay, I will do that. I wrote an article in Italian on LinkedIn about this return on learning, but I will send you other readings about this. I will send a list of readings. Okay. Do you think we should consider also cost wages of people that organize training activities in addition to the cost of? Yes, in my formula, I consider the cost of one trainer. So definitely you need to consider everything. The cost of whatever, if it's a learning platform, what is that learning platform costing you? I also, if it's a course in a classroom itself, what is the trainer's time and salary? So you need to take all those things into consideration. Today's presentation was a real simplified, how should I say, a discussion stimulant, but definitely you need to consider those. I will. Which one? Thank you.
So what else would you think?
Which one? This one?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through. Thank you for the question. How do you evaluate learning training supplier as a whole if comments, perception, training results, in fact, they take place at the individual? The question is, how do you evaluate a learning training supplier as a whole if comments, perception, training results, and effectiveness? Now let me read the question clearly. How do you evaluate a learning training supplier as a whole if comments, perceptions, training results, and effectiveness take place at the individual level and evaluation results may vary from one person to another? One of the things that must be done is to follow up on your promises. If you promise people that you're going to follow up on their comments, like I'm promising you today, you better keep your promise. So I tell people that I am going to follow up based on comments, whether that they send it to me via mail or they write it to me when I give them an evaluation at the end of a learning experience. I follow up with them and ask them for specific examples. For example, a training supplier that provides, I don't know, handouts, dispenser in Italian, handouts. And somebody says, the handouts were not clear and were really confusing. I ask them, and when I can, if I'm on site, I ask them to meet with me or send me a scanned copy of where they see the confusion and where was the confusion created. And I ask for specific examples, and I follow up with every one of them. I and my staff, we have a very small staff, but we follow up on every mention when something doesn't work. Also, when something works, when people just say, "Oh, I found the course, whatever the platform, I found the goFLUENT platform is really useful." I ask them, "Well, can you give me examples of what's really useful? Give me an example where you said, 'Wow, this was excellent. That's why I keep using it.'" I ask for specific examples. So the key is to follow up and get specific examples of what works and what doesn't work of any experience. ROL stands for Return on Learning. Thank you very much. Is it possible to get the presentation via email?
Sure.
Yes, yes, we will. I will send it to you, and I look forward to having a continued conversation. My formula is,
Maybe the last one.
yeah, it's possible to define key performance indicators to measure learning. Yes, it is possible. We can open the discussion. Maybe we can invent our own with this group, and we can create our own new and emerging formula. Yes, I agree. Someone said also it's important to communicate the learning goals in front of the learning experience. Do you agree? I agree 100%. We have to agree on what the learning goal is and what the applicability to the job is as well. So we need, again, as I said earlier, we need to be clear about what we are providing. What are we, first, not only what are we measuring, but what is the purpose of the training? We saw the 15 reasons in this slide presentation. I will send you the slide presentation, and then if you have more questions, I will also give you my personal email. I look forward to having a real productive conversation. Again, this was a stimulant, and thank you all very much.
All right, thank you for that, Maurizio. Should you wish to ask Maurizio further questions, you may email your questions to marketing@gofluent.com, and we will facilitate the collation of all the questions, and we shall send them over to Maurizio for you all to begin your exchanges with him. Once again, we thank you for attending today's webinar, and we wish you all a very pleasant day.